Welcome to Module 1, Lesson 2, Designing Your New Life. And you might be thinking that title sounds a little surprising, a little extreme. After all, this is a YouTube course, right? Well, yes, and we are definitely going to be going very in-depth with YouTube strategies and everything you need to know to build your YouTube business. But before that, we need to lay the foundations. And if you don't get these fundamentals right, it can be very difficult to build any sort of business. And so that's why this is here right at the beginning, just to make sure you've got those, because I want to make sure you have absolutely everything that you need to be successful. Partly because it looks good on me when you go on to have great success, but also because I genuinely want to see you absolutely crush it with YouTube. And I know this stuff is going to really make a difference. So in this video, we're going to cover a few things. We're going to talk about routines and rituals. We're going to talk about overcoming procrastination and maximizing your efficiency. We're going to talk about the rules and mindsets for success that the world's top performers use. And so even if you're a little bit familiar with self-development and you've been working on yourself for a while, I think there are still going to be some angles in here that are going to be really important, even if they're just reminders for things that you've kind of heard about in the past. These are the core things that are going to really help you achieve the results you want, not just with YouTube, but in all areas of your life. So let's start with routines and rituals, because if you ask me, I'd say this is the area that really determines whether someone becomes successful or not. The things they do every day, the practices and habits that are a core part of their life and everything they do. And so when we're talking about this, I think a great starting point is to think in terms of morning and evening routines, having a few tasks that you do every single day to start your day and to finish your day. So you can always be starting and ending the day in the same way. Even though everything else may change, you've got those consistencies there. And for me, one of the things I like to do is have some kind of checklist, normally on my phone, where I can just cross off those key tasks that I've picked to do every morning or evening. I use an app that is literally called Tasks. You'll find it on the App Store, or at least some variation of it, where you can input what your tasks and rituals are and cross them off each day. Because the truth is, if you win the morning, you will normally win the day anyway. Getting those first few hours right is what's going to set you up for success. And so when it comes to deciding what do you put into your morning routine, what do you put into your evening routine, well, I think we want to keep it fairly simple. We don't want an elaborate 3-hour routine that requires all kinds of convoluted things. We want things that are within our control, that are fairly simple to do, that are going to give us some easy wins to start building momentum for the day ahead, or so we're feeling good the next morning. And so if we look at a morning routine as a starting point, here are a couple of things in mind, pretty much all of my routine actually. And I think they are very useful things you should consider putting into yours. And the first thing is that I will just down some water, just drink a full glass of water as soon as I wake up, because the vast majority of people don't drink enough water, and yet the benefits we get from it are ridiculous. It just makes sense to hydrate yourself in the morning to give your body the water it needs. And if you're not yet doing this, I think you will actually see a notable difference if you do this regularly. The next thing is some form of exercise. It can be the gym, it can be sports, it can be anything. The important thing is you get your body moving first thing. Before worrying about any sort of work, get your heart racing. Not only is this going to lead to a healthier life, it's going to actually boost your productivity and your mental state throughout the day as well. After exercising, I like to then have a contrast shower. Sounds fancy, all it means is you get in the shower, but instead of just having it at one consistent temperature, which is normally a lukewarm temperature, you're gonna alternate between cold and hot. You're gonna change the temperature back and forth a couple of times, leaving it for 30 seconds or so on each setting. And then what that's gonna do is give you a huge surge of energy, especially once you've got it on the cold setting in the morning. Trust me, that will very much make sure you're fully awake, fully energized for the day ahead. And don't worry, you get used to it after a while. It doesn't actually become as bad as it sounds. Next up, I like to meditate, and I put this off for so long. I just thought I want to be constantly doing things and constantly in action. I can't have time just sat around doing nothing, as I thought of it, which was of course a very strange way of thinking of it, because meditation actually has the opposite result. It massively improves your mental clarity, gives you more focus. And so from when I looked into how many successful people were doing it, it just became a no-brainer that I had to start implementing this. And I've already started to see some results, so I would definitely recommend including that. And a fifth and final thing is having some sort of nutrition in your morning where you're getting a huge dose of nutrients, whether this is supplements that you take, whether this is just a really healthy breakfast that you have every single day, so you don't have to think about it. It's just something really nutritious to kick your day off, give you some energy. So those are a couple of examples of things that I use, but I've got those things from studying what really, really top level people do who are making millions, if not billions a year, who have really built a business for themselves from the ground up. I've looked at those people, what they do, and these are some of the practices. And you'll see they're very simple things. That's what we said earlier. We're looking for those easy wins, but they're surprising how once you do them every day, they can really build up to create a whole new mindset and a whole new way of thinking and acting. So have a think about what you want to include and what fits your lifestyle best, but definitely have a morning routine with just a few core things, add them to your task app so you can check them off every morning and build those rituals. Now, another important thing when it comes to morning routines is that you should be doing it at the same time every day. You want to, as I said, build a habit. And one of the best ways you can do that is if you're not only waking up at the same time, but sleeping at the same time. Get your sleep schedule to the point where you don't even need an alarm anymore because your body automatically knows it sleeps at this time and it wakes up at this time. That is so powerful at eliminating that tired feeling that so many of us have probably experienced before, where you feel like you've had enough sleep, but you're still tired and groggy. That's because you're not on a set sleep routine. Once you get into a same time every morning, every night, going to bed and waking up, it really transforms your sleep and your mentality and how you feel. Now, speaking of going to bed at a certain time, well, another point I really want to make here is that don't finish with a TV show. That's what I think most people do nowadays. I certainly did for a long time. Finish with some binge watching of Netflix, right? But I think a far, far better strategy is finishing the day with a book. If you want something to unwind before going to sleep, a book is always going to win. Not only is it going to make you a bit more tired, because when you're reading from a page, it has a very different effect from watching a laptop or a TV, because a laptop or a TV is stimulating, whereas a book, although the content might be stimulating, the actual process of reading it is going to make you feel a bit tireder. But also, if you're reading a book that's, for example, an autobiography of someone who's successful or someone who's ambitious or built a business or done something you want to do, anything that's kind of inspiring to you, well, that is a great way to go to sleep with that thought in your head and that in your subconscious. And I feel like when you wake up the next morning, that's kind of going to be in the back of your mind as opposed to whatever random TV show you were watching. So that's a little tip that had a huge impact on me. Another one I definitely recommend. And once you've got your routines and rituals laid out that you've decided on, I highly recommend just getting into the practice of marking a calendar every day that you successfully complete the routine or ritual. And what that does is then it gives you some accountability, because otherwise you'll have times where you just want to skip a day and just like, I'm not feeling it. But if you mark off every day on a calendar, you put a cross through the day when you do it, what's going to happen is you are not going to want to break that streak, a momentum streak we call it, where the more you do something and obviously you build up more and more crosses, it's like a chain that you just don't want to break by missing a day. And so that is a very powerful way to hold yourself accountable to your new routines. Once you get into the routine after you've been doing it for a while, you probably won't even think about breaking it because it'll be second nature, but that just helps you get started with it. So have a think about what you want to include in yours. I recommend the things we've just mentioned, but feel free to add in a couple of other things that suit you best. And then once you've got that, you are going to be ready to crush the entire day because you've set yourself up for success. Now though, let's talk about how you can overcome procrastination, be more efficient, and be more productive. Because honestly, this area is something I think everyone has experienced at some point. That feeling of knowing what you need to do, but just not being able to do it. Well, how do you change that? Well, we're now going to go through exactly how you can overcome that completely. And the very first thing, and one of the most crucial things, is you should always be giving yourself a deadline for a task. If you've heard of Parkinson's law, you'll know that work expands to the time we've got to do it. And so if you don't have a deadline, there's no urgency to get anything done. And that's why things can just go on for way longer than they ever should. Whereas if you have a clear deadline, well, that means you have to stick with it, because whatever you've got at that point, that's the end. There's no extra time. You're going to have to submit or finish whatever you're doing at that deadline. So it's going to force you to work faster. You can even have a timer up to keep you on track and stop you from veering off course, because you know, I've got to get it done within this time. And the mentality behind that is that done is better than perfect. Perfectionism can be crippling. It can really hold you back, this feeling that everything has to be 100% perfect, no tiny little mistakes whatsoever. Because the thing is, a lot of the time, things we've done are already at a good level, but we're just overly self-critical and we want things to be even better. And although that's a nice way of thinking, it's not realistic in the time we have. So done is better than perfect. Let's get into this habit of giving ourselves a specific deadline for every task and sticking to it. But if you're still procrastinating on something, the chances are that it's just too big of a task. It's too vague, it's too unclear, and it's too intimidating. That's the reason we normally procrastinate on something, because it's hard. If it was easy, we'd just do it straight away. So how do we make it easy? Well, we just break that task into smaller tasks, chop it up into smaller pieces. And so once you do that, and you've got a really small task to do, well, it'll be much easier to get started. And once you get started and you get the momentum going, it's much easier to do the rest. But if you are ever procrastinating on something, whatever that thing is, break it into smaller tasks, and I guarantee it will be easier to do. But there are still obstacles that can come into your way here. What about distractions? We need to eliminate those. And some of the main distractions, let's talk about them. One of the biggest ones is other people. And the easiest way to deal with that is, if it's on your phone, put your phone on Do Not Disturb mode whilst you're working. You can change the settings so certain people can reach you if you're waiting on an important call. You can also have it so that in an emergency, someone can ring twice and get through to you. All this kind of stuff. But the bottom line is that 99% of the time, the notifications you're getting on your phone are distractions that you do not need. Almost everything can wait. But we have this crazy mentality that people might need to reach us urgently, when it's just not true most of the time. You know, you can set up for those eventualities, but they very rarely happen. So get into the habit of putting your phone on Do Not Disturb mode so people can't reach you whilst you're working. The other thing you can do is, if people are around you and you can't get to a space where you're able to kind of shut them out completely, is just tell them, just say, you know, if you're working at home and you've got other people in the house, just tell them that between this time, I really need to work on this. And if you actually stress that to people, I would hope that they are going to be generous and thoughtful enough to not come and disturb you then, because they know how busy you are. And so they know, unless it's life or death, it can wait until after you're done. And so those two very simple things will help eliminate a lot of distractions, but sometimes it's our own temptations that get in the way. Social media, for example, it is designed to be addictive. They want to keep you on the platforms as long as possible and do everything they can to achieve that. So to overcome that, we need to block ourselves from those kind of websites and those kind of platforms. And there are several apps and extensions you can use to do that sort of thing. On your phone, there's an app called Forest. On your computer, there's a browser extension called Stay Focused. There's loads of alternatives if you just search on Google if those don't suit you. But the fact is, once you block temptations, those things that you kind of instinctively do. Have you ever been there where you just open a new tab, type in F, and Facebook comes up and you click it, and before you know it, you're scrolling for 10 minutes? Well, in order to avoid them, if we just remove the option of us even doing that, it forces us to focus on the things that actually matter and the things we need to be doing. It sounds a bit harsh, it sounds a bit extreme, but it works. And that's what really matters, taking whatever action we can to set ourselves up for success. But if you are still procrastinating after all of that, here's one final little tip for you, and I call it the 10-second countdown. If you just can't find the motivation to do something, just start counting down from 10, 10, 9, 8, all the way down. And once you get to 1, you're gonna just do it. Just start. No questions, no considerations, just whatever it is, start. And it's a really weird, and it's very simple as well, but it's a very weird thing to do, and yet it seems to override your brain's ability to come up with excuses. I find it very effective for whenever I just can't get that motivation to go and do something. I just start counting down from 10, and on 1, no matter what, I start it. And as we said earlier, once you start something, it's actually much easier to continue with it. It's like getting started, and so this will help with that. Now, there is a couple of other things that when it comes to procrastination and efficiency that are very important. And one of those is structuring your day the night before to remove indecision. We've already talked about how you can have a morning routine and an evening routine, but the actual core of your day, that middle time, that's obviously where you're going to be getting all your work done, well, that is a time that needs to be planned out a little bit more before the actual day where it's happening. So the night before, just spend a couple of minutes kind of planning out what's going to be happening at what time. It doesn't have to be to the minute because obviously things are going to change slightly. But once you've got a clear plan of what you're doing that day and it's very clear, it removes that indecision and that confusion about what you should be doing, so you can always stay on task and have that structure. Structure is what is going to allow you to be productive. And a very final point on that is this is going to help you kill busy work, which is the work we're doing which doesn't actually provide any real value. You know what I'm talking about here. Things like checking email all the time throughout the day, when that can just be done in 5 minutes at the end, rather than constantly replying to every single email as it comes in, which disrupts your flow. Because that's the real point we're trying to get to here. We're trying to design our days in a way where we can get into that flow state, where we know exactly what's going to be happening next, what we're doing, and we've got no distractions, and so we can just stay on task the entire time. And then it's surprising what that does to your mind when you're in that flow state and how much more you can achieve, how much better you feel. So it's win-win in all these different ways, but eliminating busy work and those pointless tasks is a crucial thing to do. So if you ever catch yourself doing something that you then think, wait, this isn't really going to lead to the results that I want, this is kind of a waste of time. I could either outsource this task really cheaply, or it just doesn't need to be done at all. Well, then as soon as you catch yourself in that state, stop doing it and make a note that you're never going to be doing that again, because busy work is the enemy. Hopefully that's given you a couple of pointers about being more efficient. Those are really the core things that you need. You don't really need to know much else, because once you've blocked out distractions, you've scheduled your day, and you've got deadlines for tasks, all of that stuff, you are set up for success. Now let's move on to the rules of success to become a magnate, because a magnate is simply a wealthy and influential business person, but there are some core principles that are going to be universal no matter what the industry, no matter what the niche, and certainly very applicable with YouTube. And so when we're talking about rules of success, one of the biggest things is having goals, which I'm sure you've heard of before. But a lot of people have very vague goals. What we want is to know very specifically what we are working towards and what we are aiming for, both in the fairly short term and in the long term. And I like to think of it as goals being the more short-term thing, and then vision being the more long-term thing. So your vision is how you want your life to be, maybe in 5 years' time, where you want to be. You know, really picture who you're going to be with, what it's going to look like, what you're going to be doing each day, all of that kind of stuff. Because that means that when you are having times where you're struggling for motivation a little bit, thinking of your vision and that dream life that you want and you're working towards is going to keep you on track. But of course, that's the long-term plan. So we need the more short-term goals as well. Literally write them down, what you're working towards this month. What are we going to be achieving right here, right now? What's the actual thing we're working towards? Because without a goal, our work feels a little bit aimless and unstructured. And so having these is surprisingly effective. Even though it's something we all know about, most people won't take the time to write them down, list them out, and then pin them up somewhere you can see them so they're always on your minds. The next thing we need to talk about as a core rule of success is managing your self-care. care, looking after yourself basically. Because the chances are, if you're adding YouTube into your life and you're spending this extra time working on it, although hopefully it's going to be quite enjoyable, the fact is it's still more work. And so you really need to scale your self-care as well and looking after yourself. And obviously there are some basics that are very well known, things like managing your sleep, which we talked about earlier, looking after your diet, make sure you're getting enough nutrients and you're eating relatively healthy. I'm not saying you have to become a fitness fanatic or anything, but definitely those core things are going to affect your mental state as well as your physical health. But there are other things as well, like the meditation we mentioned, maybe massages. Think about what you can do to give yourself some downtime, some relaxation, because working all the time and that constant hustle mentality, that tends to lead to burnout. Yes, we want to work very hard, but we want to be doing it in a way that's efficient so that we can then have some time for downtime, relaxing and looking after ourselves. So make sure you factor that in to your schedule and your plans, because if it's all work, it's going to be really difficult to keep that going. Another rule of success, something I haven't heard many people talking about actually, is this concept of a success list, which is where you track your successes. And the reason this is so important is that we often have a tendency to really focus on the negatives. I'm not sure why this is, but when something bad happens, that tends to stick with us more than when something good happens. And so having a success list is where you literally write down every time you have one of those wins. Something good happens, something that you're proud of, someone compliments you, someone says you're doing well with something, anything that's positive and means something to you, you write it down on the success list. And obviously, as you become even more successful, your kind of bar of what counts to go on the success list may raise. But at the beginning, any little thing that feels like a success, feels like a little victory, no matter how small, add it to the list, and then you're going to have a literal list of things you can refer back to that remind you of the progress you've made, how well you've been doing. And so on those days where you're feeling a bit down and something hasn't gone quite right, referring back to that is going to be very, very powerful. So I highly recommend not skipping that. Most people do, but as soon as I introduced this into my life, I noticed a big increase in my happiness and my overall feeling of that I'm on the right path, basically. That's what it does. It reminds you that you're making progress, even if it feels small. You can see all those successes laid out. And that can be written down on a notepad if that's easier, but I just keep mine on a Google document, so it's always accessible on my phone or on my laptop. Next rule of success we need to talk about is failing your way to success. One of the biggest problems that people have is they're scared of failure, and that means they don't take action. And let's look at YouTube for a second. I think the fear of putting yourself out there and being on camera and it not working and people criticizing you, that is what seems to hold a lot of people off. And so we'll talk about that in more detail later, but I just want to remind you of this principle that the only real way to succeed is by failing your way to get there. Every failure is another step towards your ultimate success. Very, very few people have ever just had a straight line from starting to success. No, there are failures on the way, but you learn from them, you realize what the mistakes were or what you could have done differently, and then you take those lessons and you implement them so that you can do better next time, and you keep getting gradually better, keep improving. And so failing your way to success is a very freeing concept, because it means that you don't have to worry about something not working, because you know that you're still going to take something from that. You learn more from the failures than the successes. And it sounds like a cliche, cheesy thing, but it's absolutely true. Now, let's talk about the law of environmental exposure. And you've probably heard the phrase before, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Well, a variation of that, which is essentially what the law of environmental exposure is that your income is going to be the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And although that's perhaps not going to work out literally, I think the general principle behind it is very true, that when you surround yourself with really ambitious people who are on a similar path, people who understand the idea of the laptop lifestyle and running an online business, it really changes your own mindset. It really motivates you to be better and keep pushing yourself. Whereas if you're surrounded constantly by people who are criticizing you for going on an unconventional path, people who just don't get it at all and are happy living a very average, boring life, well, then it's going to be so difficult to constantly stay motivated. So what can you do about that? Well, what about our Facebook group as a starting point? That is literally a group of people who are on the exact same path, people who are driven, people who are motivated, and who are fully working towards the same objective. So that is a great starting point, and that's why it's a key part of this course, sorry. Next though, you want to be looking for other places that you can hang around with like-minded people. That can be in real life. Hopefully there is some people that you know that you could talk to more often who kind of just get it, understand what you're going through and understand what you're working towards. But if not, there are so many places online you can do that. There are YouTube forums, there are other Facebook groups you can join, not even just about YouTube, but about entrepreneurship in general and people who are very motivated to be successful. Once you surround yourself with those people and their way of thinking, it transfers to you. Like osmosis, those positive, driven people will transfer their energy to you. And now I want to talk about the fact that in this course, one of the fundamental shifts that's going to happen is that you're going to go from the consumer to the creator. And in my mind, this is one of the biggest rules of success, because the fact is, at the moment, you are probably consuming a lot of content, and obviously for this course you are going to be consuming a lot of information. But because this course is so comprehensive, because it gives you all the tools, the strategies, everything you need to know, after that you really don't need to be consuming as much content. You need to be creating far more than you're watching and listening to. Because as great as it is to be getting new ideas and new self-development, new business strategies, all of this stuff, what tends to happen is we overwhelm ourselves with all this information, but don't actually take action on enough of it. And the fact is, learning all this stuff but not taking action is kind of pointless. And so we need to get into this mindset that we are going to become the creators, not the consumers. Yes, you can still watch some stuff here and there. In fact, a little bit just to keep fresh ideas coming in. That's great. But don't spend hours and hours watching more stuff, looking for that next little tip or trick, especially with YouTube, because I'm going to be giving you everything you need to know. So spend your time implementing it and you'll get much, much better results. So just bear in mind that throughout this course, you are going to become the creator, not the consumer. However, the very final thing we need to address is this idea of self-confidence and self-belief, because I think a lot of people struggle with this. Hopefully you don't, but if you do, I just want to let you know right now categorically that you are going to be successful. Because the reason I know that is because it is all down to your mindset. And in this course, we are going to be instilling that success mindset in you throughout. The fact is, everyone is capable of achieving great things. I truly believe that. But most people just don't have that drive. They don't have that mindset. They don't have that way of thinking. So once you have that, and once you combine that with the tools we're giving you, the strategy and the blueprint, there really is nothing that's going to be able to stop you as long as you keep going with it. And as we touched on before, the fact you're even in this course shows you have this drive, you have the right mindset already. It's just a case of working on that and never doubting the fact that you are going to be successful. It's not a case of if, it's a case of when. So really instill that self-belief into yourself. And as you grow your success list, you're going to start feeling more and more confident in that. But I just want to reassure you that I very much believe in you, because I know if you've got to this point right now, you are going to be successful. You just have to keep going, implement this stuff, stay focused, which brings us very nicely to this final point. And that is that I need you to stay on the path. And what I mean by this is that it'll be very tempting after completing this course to get started, you start getting a little bit of momentum, but maybe it's a little bit slower than you were hoping for, because those very first few weeks on YouTube can be, almost certainly will be actually, the hardest. And what a lot of people do then is they think, oh, maybe there's a quicker route. Maybe there's something else I could be doing. What about one of the other social platforms? Maybe I could build a brand there. I really cannot stress enough that if you stay on the path and you see it through, you stay focused on that vision, then you will achieve what you want. The problem is people give up too soon. People quit before they see the results. And so you just need to stay on that path, block out all the distractions, all the people telling you, oh wait, there's this brand new opportunity. No, YouTube has been proven to be a consistently solid and brilliant way actually of making a full-time income if you follow a business blueprint like the one we have for you. The fact is, if you stay on that path, you will be able to get the results you want. If you veer off, it is going to massively slow you down. So you probably already know this, but I just wanted to put this in at the end here as a reminder that you just need to have that patience and not veer off in different directions, and then you're going to get the results that you want. Now, that is just kind of a crash course of different mindsets and mentalities, but those really are the fundamentals. Once you have those, you are going to be extremely prepared to succeed, not only in YouTube, but in all areas of your life. So I highly recommend going back over those, really thinking about things like your morning and evening routine. You know, don't just hear the information, actually put it into practice. That's what we're saying here. So I hope that has just given you a few things to think about, even if it was mainly a refresher. But now we can go on and look at the bigger picture of YouTube now that you've got those fundamentals, and I'm very excited to see you in the next lesson.